everyone. My name is Deneen White, and I am the host of the Coffee in the Green Room podcast. Today, I have the special honor of having one of my very good friends, Craig Bruce, on the podcast. First of all, Craig, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the podcast today.
Deneen, the pleasure is all mine. I've been looking forward to this and super excited about our conversation and sharing my message.
Oh my gosh. And what a message you have. So before we introduce, you have a very big milestone that you've achieved today. Okay. But before we do that, can you give my audience a little bit of your background?
Yeah. And for 25 years, I led the life of this busy global executive. Partner in a management global consulting firm, expat in Brazil, Mexico, 2.5 million miles on one airline and 1 million miles on another. And whoa. Deneen, I wore that like a badge of honor. And you know what? I was living the life that the external world was like, man, this guy's got the world by the tail. And yet, from my perspective, I was empty. Yeah. And my awakening came when on a flight, a flight attendant looked at me and in not such a polite voice said to me, "You look horrible." Can you imagine that? Unsolicited. And
some random woman just like, "Hey, you look terrible today."
Yeah, exactly. And actually, I wish I knew who she was because I would thank her today for that. And those 3 words hit me like a ton of bricks, so much so that I began to really tear up in that moment. And what I began to realize is that while I was living, I just wasn't alive, and it was all good until it wasn't.
Yeah, I feel like probably 90% of the people listening can understand that. Maybe they're not putting 1 million or 2.5 million miles on an airline, but they can understand that because we live in a world right now where we're doing. We're all addicted to doing the dopamine of I have a to-do list. Guess what? I got all this stuff done and the things Absolutely. I'm going to do tomorrow. And like we keep going, but we're living unfulfilled lives. A lot of us are living unfulfilled lives, which is why I'm so excited about your book, which is called The Fulfillment Revolution: From Empty Achievements to Prosperity with Purpose. So Craig, that moment on an airplane was a turning point for you. You started to look inward and you had to start making some changes in your life. Can you talk a little bit about those changes? And then we're going to talk about the revolution that you're starting in the world. Yeah.
And I will say, I'll finish that story for just a moment, is that the very next day I ended up in my doctor's office. Oh, wow. And my doctor ordered bed rest. And my version of bed rest being that, to your point, addicted to success, literally addicted, physically addicted to success was my laptop, my cell phone, and conference calls from my bed. And that was the true turning moment. And what I realized is that something had to change. And what had to change is I had to begin to prioritize me. It didn't mean I had to give up all the success. It just means I had to start taking better care of myself. And that journey really began by getting clear on my values and what's important to me. And those are the conversations I'm having with my clients.
That's amazing. And so let's dive into that, because again, whether it's an entrepreneur listening to this, maybe an actor, model, it doesn't matter, because we all want that next success, right? And that's what's it's almost like there's a carrot that they're dangling in front of us. Hey, if you do this, then you're going to get this. But at the end of the day, when you're chasing carrots, that's not fulfilling. So can we talk a little bit about, I know you have a process that you walk your clients through. Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about that, which I know you've laid out in your book, because I definitely want people I want people to go out and buy this book in droves.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And so do I, because the fulfillment revolution it's a movement. It's an uprising. It's an uprising against what society deems as successful. Right? It's about redefining success on your own terms. And that's why this book is so important right now. And I think you mentioned it. We're all running at this unprecedented pace, and we're all chasing our dreams, and we're all delivering results, and to the sacrifice of our health, our wellness, and the relationships that mean the most to us. Mm. And at some point, that will catch up with you. That's been my experience. At some point, my clients, the business leaders, the executives, the entrepreneurs, they reach a point in their life where they just begin to ask a series of questions. Questions like, is this who I really am? Or is this all there is to life? Or in some cases, WTF, right?
Yes. I mean, we've all been there. We've all been to that point where like, okay, like what, like, why am I doing this? So yeah.
And so the framework then that I created based on over the last 10 years coaching hundreds of high performing business leaders is what I call my Elevate You blueprint. And it's really built on 3 pillars. And I'll tell you what those pillars are, and then we can talk about whatever you'd like to talk about. The first pillar is consciousness. Put simply, consciousness is who you're being and how you want to show up every day. And it involves growth, a growth mindset. It involves clarity, and it involves intention. So let's get clear and intentional about who you want to be and how you want to show up. And the key component to that is, what are your values? Because once we get clear on our values, we can then use those as a framework for every decision we make in our life.
Yeah, it's true.
That's pillar number 1. How does that resonate?
With me, it's resonating loud and clear. Because if you don't know what you stand for anything, right? Yeah. So you have to have those core values delineated. Right. Like, what are your absolute musts and what are your absolute must nots, and what are things you're willing to compromise on that won't stop you from being in alignment with those values that you've set.
I love that. And the reason intention is so important, one of my mentors, Michael Bernard Beckwith, who is founder of the Agape Spiritual Center here in Los Angeles, he says, with intention, you have design. Without intention, you have default. Think about that. And
that's really good.
Who here wants to live their life in default?
No one. And it's funny because just as a little aside, one of the biggest insults that kids today give to one another is when they're playing video games. Oh, you're a default. So it's funny. Oh, really? That, like, yeah, so like it's because you don't get the skin like for Fortnite or whatever. So it's funny that you say that, because that default, like being a default is almost being ostracized even as children. But then we grow up in default mode. So how are you combating this, Craig? Yeah.
So again, it's getting very clear about who you want to be, how you want to show up, and what are your key values, because then it's very clear about what should come next. And let's get very intentional about what actions. So that's pillar number 1. Pillar number 1 is consciousness. Pillar number 2 is lifestyle. And that's really the science. It's the way you live your life. It's how you nourish, restore, and move your body that supports your health, your wellness, and your longevity. And everything we coach on is science-based. And it's about creating morning ritual, an evening ritual that will get your morning started off tremendously, right? To set you up for success during the day. And little habits like, hydrate before you caffeinate, or when you get up, first thing you should be doing is, after that water, you should just go out and get some sunlight. And if you can, get some movement in. It sets you up for success. The evening ritual then.
I find if I go to the gym in the morning, my whole day is so much better.
Yeah, totally. And there's all kinds of science behind that. And then the evening ritual is really about setting yourself up for a good night quality sleep. And, what do most of us do right before we go to bed? We get on these things, don't we? And we scroll. It's the absolute worst thing to do. So I work with the business leaders, and we create these morning rituals. We get these rituals on their calendars, because if you got it on your calendar, I find you're more likely to be successful, particularly as a business leader. So consciousness, pillar number 1, lifestyle, pillar number 2. And the third one, and this surprises a lot of people, but the research is undeniable. The third pillar is community.
Ooh.
And that is really the conversations you have with yourself, mm-hmm. conversations you have with all your key relationships, your most valued relationships, and then the relationship you have with your career. Those are the 3 aspects of, I believe, someone's life. I've kind of boiled it down to those 3 aspects to try to simplify things. And key to that is, let's get very clear about the relationships that you want to nurture in your life. Because you can't be everything to everybody. And so you've got to be very clear. And then the second part of that is setting boundaries. I don't use the word boundaries.
Word boundaries.
Yeah, it is. It's a 4-letter word, and guess what? We're really bad at it, aren't we?
Yeah.
I prefer to use the word terms of engagement versus boundaries.
That sounds like war, though. What are the terms of engagement? So you're living your life like war when you say that, at least in my mind.
Well, that's interesting.
But I like that.
That's interesting. I had not thought of that. The way I think about it is, I want to engage with you, but we just want to do it on my terms. So.
Okay. No, I like that. But you know what? At the end of the day, we're all in a war for our own lives, right?
Yeah.
So I think that when we hear war, we think negative, but I think sometimes when you're warring, it could be for something good too, because you would go to war for your family. Why wouldn't you go to war for yourself?
Yeah. Yeah. And if you, that whole, we started with the idea of getting clear about your values. And so can you, I hope your listeners can see how once you get clear on those values, that just flows through all those other pillars, and it gives you a decision-making framework.
Yeah. Yeah, it does. It definitely does. So we were talking about some of the people that you've worked with, and this sounds everything you're saying sounds amazing, but sometimes implementing it on your own might be a little bit daunting, because you know what, like, to go back to the third pillar, which is community, right? A lot of times you need someone to hold you accountable to achieving those goals that you have. Right. At least I know I do. When I work with a personal trainer, I'm a lot better at getting to the gym and making sure I put in all of the reps. So let's talk a little bit about that. Let's talk about the community aspect and about holding yourself accountable, because you've worked with some amazing people. Yeah. And I'm hoping that you're willing to share one of the stories of an executive that you've taken through this process that's had some tremendous results.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I was working with a partner in a global executive consulting firm, and he came to me because he was struggling with his health, and also just both physical and mental, and so his goals were really to improve his health and his wellness. And then also begin to think about what his next chapter was. And so we went through those 4 pillars. He got very clear. And, I have his, and one of the things we do is in coaching is we create an I am statement. So let's get very clear. And I will read his I am statement, if that's okay, because I thought you might ask this question, but his I am statement, and you'll be able to hear the values, the things that are important to him is I'm a role model to my family, and I am leaving a legacy for my kids by living a purposeful, joyful, grateful, and fulfilled life. Now, can you imagine waking up to that?
Affirmation.
Yeah, can you imagine waking up to that every day? And so over a period of, we actually worked together for almost 2 years, but over a period of 6 months, we got very clear about who he was. We created that I am statement that guided everything for the future. We got very clear about his health and wellness, and his nutrition was pretty good, but we got him he started working with a personal trainer, and then got very clear about the relationships that he wanted to nurture, literally to the point where we identified the top 20 relationships he wanted in his life going forward, and we grouped those into A, B, and C.
Wow.
All right. That's how, right. And then created a plan. And then after we got all that done, the last year and a half was really working toward his retirement and his next chapter, because, and you and I have talked about this, my generations after me, we're not retiring. We're just doing something that is aligned with our purpose and our vision and our mission and our values. Yeah. And got very clear about what that was. And so I will be attending his retirement party in January. He's gone back to school because he wanted to get another degree. And the biggest compliment that he paid to me was to say, when we kind of ended the coaching relationship after a couple of years, was, I'm living the life that we designed together. And
how
you know what?
How did you feel when he said that?
Well, you know me. I
can see it on your face.
Kind of got a little emotional about it. I get a little emotional now about it. Yeah. So that's hopefully that's an example of that's one person. But it gives you an idea of how powerful, when you get real clear about who you are, when you get intentional about the life you want to live, amazing things can happen.
That's amazing. I love that. And I feel like it is a revolution. You say it's a movement. I feel like it's a revolution because it goes against everything that we're being taught right now. Right.
It does.
So let's bring this back to your amazing book that is now out on Amazon. Tell me about the book. Tell me about how you're helping people become a part of this movement, a part of this revolution. Yeah.
The book was written. Well, first of all, I'll tell you it's built on my story and my experience, very science-based, lots of client examples. And it's really about creating an awareness, helping people create an awareness or realize that life is short, and that with success for most people come sacrifices. And in my experience, it doesn't have to be that way long term. And so we go through we go through the blueprint. There's a ton of information, lots of questions. One of my superpowers is asking questions, because I believe that everybody has what they need inside of them. You just need a coach or a guide to ask the right questions to help you realize your full potential. So there are lots of questions and that you can be reflective on. And ultimately, then the very last chapter is about designing your next chapter for those who are at that point in their life.
That's all. And you know what? Let's be honest. I think everyone is at that point in their life.
Yeah.
Because you know what? One of my favorite songs is Unwritten by Natasha Bedingfield, and it says your book is still unwritten. Uh-huh. Right. And I feel like everyone's next chapter is unwritten. Yeah. And even if you're not ready to retire, like I'm not ready to retire.
Right.
But you know what? I'm ready for that next chapter of Deneen White.
It's a great point.
3.0. So this book is not only for people who are high level executives who are, okay, you know what? I'm at the WTF point in my life. I'm like, okay, I'm done. What's next? But it's also for people who want to be intentional about crafting the life that they've always wanted to live.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's also about, and you know, you and I have had some conversations about this, and you helped me with an epiphany. It's about ultimately helping people be seen.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Now it's my turn to get a little verklempt here. But no, I mean, because you know what? And we all fight for attention. We're all doing different things to get attention. But at the end of the day, do you want to be seen because you're like doing a dance on TikTok, or do you want to be seen because you're a high achiever who has no relationship with your family? Or do you want to be seen as that person that you were at your core, you truly are? And do you want to bring that gift to the world? And I feel like that's what you're so good at doing, Craig, because I know there have been times where I'm like, hey, you're like, hey, how are you? I'm like, oh, I'm good. You're like, how are you? I'm like, I'm good. You're like, no, really, how are you? And I'm like, oh, I mean, and it's just like, we need that person in our life. And sometimes we don't have that person in our life. So we have to be that person. The question we like to ask a lot of times is, who motivates the motivator? A lot of times the motivator has to motivate themselves. And your book is an amazing tool to help the motivator motivate themselves and then find that community.
Yeah.
If it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? The intentionality has to come in at some point. So even if you're listening to this podcast, if you're watching this video and you're like, but I don't have a Craig Bruce in my, first of all, you can. We'll get to that in just a moment. But if you don't have that Craig Bruce in your life, get the book, start reading it, put those principles into action, and then develop that blueprint, develop that dream 20, dream 100 people that you want to be in community with, and then start making the strides. Because in life, you get what you expect, not what you want. So I can say, oh my God, I want this, I want that. But if I live my life with expectation, then I'll get it. And I feel like that's what your book is about, setting that expectation.
Yeah, it is. And I will also add, and thank you for that wonderful summary. You articulated that really well. To be a leader in your community, to be a leader in your family, to be a leader in your business, you first have to lead yourself. Yeah. And leading yourself involves getting to know who you are, what's important to you, so then you can lead others. So for those of you who are listening, again, this book is really about understanding who you are, so that then you can take your gift out into the world and really impact, honestly, impact the room you're in.
Yeah. Yeah. One of our mutual friends, Bill Walsh, always likes to say, your story is too big to play small. Yeah. So let's stop playing small. Let's stop diminishing our own value. Yeah. Let's get in tune with that, and let's bring that to the world, because the world's waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. And we clearly need leaders in the world who know who they are and their values to lead us forward in this crazy world we're living in.
Awesome. Well, Craig Bruce, where can people find you, and where can people find the Fulfillment Revolution? The best way to find me is my website, and I'll give you that. It's evolvehealthandlifestyle.com, and that's all one word, evolvehealthandlifestyle.com. That's where there's a you can schedule a call with me on that website, and then also at the very top you can order the book. What? So everyone, if you're listening to this podcast, I don't care when you're listening to it, go right to Amazon right now, go to the Fulfillment Revolution and get your book, because you know what? Your story is too big to play small. And now is the time for you to step into that person that you are at your core. Craig Bruce, thank you so much for being on this podcast. Thank you for giving me time. I know you have a lot going on with a book just being released, but thank you so much for being here with me today. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's such a pleasure. And thank you and VIP Ignite for what you do in the world as well. Thank you. All right, guys. So if you loved this episode of Coffee in the Green Room, this is what I want you to do. I want you to click on the link below. Make sure you subscribe, because you know what? You never know what conversations we're going to have here on Coffee in the Green Room. Thank you so much. And I'll see you on the next episode. Bye.